Hi, my name's Brooke Booth. I'm a life coach that helps Mormons deal with a mixed faith marriage because of a faith transition. I'm also a moderator and a member here at the Restoration Table. I want to put together just this little sort of training video on communication because it's one of the number one things my clients come to me with, and it's one of the number one skills that I think are absolutely critical in order to have a successful mixed faith marriage and hence successful any kind of marriage, right? So I want to talk about this here at the Restoration Table because mixed faith marriage and communication really reflects the purpose of this group, right? This group is put together to bring us all to the table where we can learn how to communicate better with those that we don't necessarily see eye to eye with, right? And this is very much the hallmark of a mixed faith marriage. So I think the purposes of this group really support a lot of the practices and tools that can be developed and nurtured to make a mixed faith marriage very successful. So I'm going to talk about communication. So I see sort of two extreme ends of the spectrum happen in a mixed faith marriage in communication. And one is, on one end of the spectrum, I see where it becomes like confrontational, where one spouse gets very protective of their beliefs at all costs, right? There is no wiggle room, no room for discussion or negotiation. And on the other side of the spectrum of communication, I see a lack of directness in conversation. And I'm going to call it a lack of honesty. It's where there's people pleasing and not being really clear on where you stand, a lack of assertiveness. And this is the end of the spectrum I'm going to address in this video. This lack of directness, this dancing around, avoiding, people-pleasing aspect that I see in the clients I work with and in my own life. And I want to also point out that the middle ground, right, the ground between confrontation and the lack of directness and confrontation, the middle ground is to be direct and assertive. Now, assertiveness is not, well, I'll say it this way. Assertiveness is sometimes viewed as combative and disruptive. Think of the proverbial rocking the boat. And to avoid this, we often play it safe. We dance around issues, we skirt around issues, we talk around issues, but rarely do we address them head on. And I think a lot of the reasons we do this is we try to avoid contention at all costs. So we also avoid discussions that may involve different viewpoints or disagreement because we're afraid it may end up in contention. When we play it safe, like this, we often engage in passive-aggressive behavior. And the irony there is that's not really playing it safe. It has very real consequences for our marriages, for our marriage and our relationships. And I'll talk about those more later. But first, let me walk you through what passive-aggressive behavior may look like, how it may present in a relationship. Complaining. Passive person may say things like, I don't like how he shared that message. A more direct person might say, I don't agree with that message, with his message. Avoiding. Passive person may say, I'm fine, even when they're not. A direct person would say something like, I'm hurt, and I'm still processing it, and I'm not ready to talk about it. Another behavior is acting hostile. The passive person may say, that's stupid. The direct person might say, I don't understand. Can you tell me more about it? Another behavior is procrastinate. The passive person may say, I was too busy to do that. And the direct person might say, I didn't think that was important. Let me tell you specifically how this might look in a mixed faith marriage. The transitioning spouse may, and this is the complaining piece, may complain about the church's policies instead of directly stating that they don't believe in the church's truth claims. The believing spouse may complain about having to watch the kids at church instead of being open about their embarrassment about having to go to church without their spouse. Now, this has very real consequences, these passive-aggressive behaviors. It can lead to disconnection, frustration, resentment, all of these things. It almost always invariably creates a lack of emotional intimacy. Now, this is a very high price to pay for not wanting to rock the boat. So I want to share with you, in order to avoid some of these negative consequences, I want to share with you the number one tip, in my opinion, to avoid passive aggression, avoid this end of the spectrum where you dance around things and you're not direct or you're not assertive. Maybe you complain or procrastinate or avoid. Because, like I said, that's a very high price to pay. So my number one tip is this: be honest. Stop people pleasing. Stop trying to be who you think your spouse wants you to be or your parents want you to be. Start being yourself. Stop saying you're fine when you're not. So when we're so busy trying to be who we think they want us to be, we block the very connection that we want so badly in our marriages. They are effectively having a relationship with the pretend version of you and not the real you. This does not build emotional intimacy. Now, the truth may hurt in the short term. It really might. But in the long term, the truth will only nurture your marriage. And let me be very clear. When I say be honest, I don't mean brutal. I don't mean without tact or without care. That's very different. This is not permission to be unkind. It is simply asking you to stop pretending and to stop wearing a mask, because that's a very exhausting way to be in relationship. So sometimes both the transitioning spouse and the believing spouse think they need to wear a mask. Now, I'll just pause here for a minute. When I say transitioning, I mean the spouse who's having the faith transition, and believing, I mean like the active believing spouse. So sometimes both the transitioning and the believing spouse wear the mask. The transitioning spouse may be worried about what will happen if the truth comes out, right? And they may pretend to be all in. Further down that timeline, the believing spouse, whose spouse is now post-Mormon, may worry about appearing complicit or condoning their spouse's behavior. And so they may worry that if they ever relax, they'll appear weak or complicit, so they act more rigid than they would normally around their religious practices, than they would normally choose otherwise. Now, both of these types of behavior are masking, and both of these behaviors can really undermine a marriage. The truth will set you free is a cliche, but it is a cliche that applies here 100%. When you are not trying to keep up a facade and you're just yourself, you tend to let others be who they are. Maybe that's believing, maybe that's not believing, maybe that's somewhere in between. Allowing others to be exactly who they are and allowing ourselves to be exactly who we are can almost magically cure complaining and hostility. In this place of allowance, it's so much easier to state what we think and listen to others state what we think. In other words, it's so much easier to be honest and to take off the mask. So you can develop this type of assertive communication skills. It's a skill you develop. And when you can and do develop it, you avoid so much resentment, so much frustration. And bonus, you avoid all of those passive-aggressive behaviors that we talked about already. They just aren't issues anymore. And this is the part I really like to think about. When you're able to develop this type of assertive communication, you become trustworthy. What I mean by that is you help create like a proverbial safe space for your loved ones to come to you and share who they really are with you. That's emotional intimacy. Because they know they'll be safe there, they won't be rejected, they won't be betrayed. It's a very beautiful thing to offer those we love. It's a very beautiful thing. So if you want to learn more, if you want to really dive into the next level of communication, just message me and message me your email address. I'll send you a free communication worksheet I use with my clients. It teaches you, on top of this, another communication tool that specifically for difficult conversations, because I guarantee every single marriage, but especially mixed faith marriages, you need the skill of being able to execute a difficult conversation. So message me your email address. I will make sure you get that. It's an interactive worksheet. I hope you find it helpful. If you wanted to follow me, I post regularly on my Facebook page. brookeboothcoaching.com is my website. Lots and lots of materials, free materials to help you in your mixed faith marriage. All right. Wishing you the best.